Let's discuss Vincent Pastore. This is another lecture. Let's begin with the foundations. I'm Alexei, and today we will examine how a particular performance persona crystallizes, travels across media, and persists. We will also keep our feet on the ground because this story begins in the Bronx and New Rochelle, not in an acting conservatory green room.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. I'll be asking questions as we go and, trying to connect the dots, the way many of us would when we first encounter his work.
To frame our discussion, Vincent Dominic Pastore was an American actor, born in 1946 in the Bronx, who became widely recognized for portraying Italian-American gangsters. The canonical role is Salvatore Big Pussy Bonpensiero on HBO's The Sopranos, which ran from 1999 to 2007, with Pastore sharing an ensemble SAG Awards in 2000 and 2001. It is crucial to understand typecasting here. Typecasting is an allocation mechanism in which an actor repeatedly receives roles that align with a perceived persona. In this case, the mafioso archetype. We observe this pattern in his early filmography. Goodfellas in 1990, credited as Vinny Pastore. Carlito's Way in 1993. Gotti in 1996 as Angelo Ruggiero. The Sopranos consolidates the brand, and then the brand radiates outward into comedy and voice work. For example, Shark Tale in 2004 as Luca, and later meta riffs like voicing Big Pussy in Animals.
So, basically, once audiences and casting directors linked him to that wise guy space, it kind of became a feedback loop. Like, the more he did it, the more convincing and expected it became.
Exactly. And we should note that the persona is not purely a studio invention. Pastore grew up in an Italian-American neighborhood in New Rochelle after being born in the Bronx. The accent, cadence, and working-class references conferred authenticity. Before acting, he worked in the club business and as a chauffeur. This biographical substrate, combined with formal drama training at Pace University and service in the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam era, gave him a disciplined, lived-in quality that reads as credible on camera. In simpler terms, he looked and sounded like the part, and he knew how such men moved through the world. Why does this matter? The Sopranos altered the grammar of American television drama. Its moral ambiguity, psychological depth, and cinematic production values shaped what we now consider prestige TV. Pastore's Big Pussy arc is among the show's early emotional engines, creating a template for how secondary characters can carry tragic weight. Beyond that, his shift from blue-collar work into acting midlife demonstrates how off-screen experience can become on-screen capital, particularly when a culture is already fluent in certain archetypes.
And it's not just TV, right? He kept showing up in different places, like radio and later podcasting, where the neighborhood vibe still mattered.
Correct. The Wise Guys show on Sirius Satellite Radio, produced by Steven Van Zandt, channeled his Sopranos fame into a weekly celebration of Italian-American culture. He also did local WVOX stints in New Rochelle, then launched the podcast Forget About It with Vinny Pastore in 2020. And in parallel, the entrepreneurial thread, a tomato sauce line introduced in 2019, emphasizing San Marzano tomatoes, non-GMO, no added sugar. This too is the brand at work. Culinary tradition and media persona become mutually reinforcing.
Can we sketch the basic timeline quickly, like the headline moments?
Briefly, born in 1946 in the Bronx, raised in New Rochelle, post-high school, U.S. Navy service during the Vietnam era. Later, a drama degree from Pace University. Screen work picks up in the late 1980s and early 1990s, sometimes credited as Vinny Pastore. Goodfellas in 1990, Carlito's Way in 1993. Notable 1999 entries include The Hurricane as Alfred Bello, and crucially, The Sopranos beginning that same year. In 2004, Shark Tale for voice acting, radio hosting and recurring television appearances throughout the 2000s. A high-profile reality TV run including The Celebrity Apprentice in 2008, where he raised funds for pancreatic cancer research and, in a Sopranos-style flourish, resigned in an episode that cut to black. Stage work includes Broadway's Chicago in 2007 and Bullets Over Broadway in 2014, Off-Broadway in 2016. He launched his sauce in 2019 and his podcast in 2020. Late career cameos include himself on The Curse in 2024 and a voice role in Yellow Jackets in 2025.
And he stayed close to home, right? The City Island in the Bronx.
Yes, he lived on City Island, a maritime neighborhood that suited his identity. In August 2026, he was found deceased at his residence on City Island. He was 80. Reports then indicated the cause of death had not yet been confirmed. The last known phone contact was the day before, and he had been seen 3 days earlier. That uncertainty remains part of the public record and, as of those reports, required subsequent confirmation. A brief personal observation. When we study typecasting, we sometimes reach for abstract models. In probability terms, a casting director updates a posterior based on prior observations. Pastore's career is a very human demonstration of this. The prior was the Bronx, the voice, the bearing. The likelihood was the credibility of each performance. The posterior, over time, became inevitable. It is worth noting that he also learned to play with that inevitability, which is where the humor lives. Moving forward, I propose 3 large questions to guide us. First, how did real-life experience shape early typecasting? Second, what if the inciting friendships had not occurred? Third, how do unresolved details around his death affect legacy and future portrayals?
For the first question, I'm curious about the transition itself. How do we get from running clubs and driving to suddenly credit in Goodfellas and then this steady stream of roles? It feels abrupt on paper.
The connective tissue is relational. Pastore befriended actors Matt Dillon and Kevin Dillon. Those ties introduced him to New York productions at a moment, late 1980s and early 1990s, when location-heavy shoots needed reliable day players who looked at home in neighborhood scenes. The club business background conferred 2 advantages: practical knowledge of how street economies function and a network sensibility. This is not theoretical. His early credits arrive in volume in 1990, often small but resonant, and by 1996, he is Angelo Ruggiero in HBO's Gotti. We can infer that the combination of relationships, timing, and lived credibility made him a low-risk, high-authenticity choice for casting directors operating under tight schedules.
So, the Dillon connection mattered not just as a friendship, but as a door to the right rooms. Could we say that without that, he would still have eventually found his way? Or was this catalytic in a stronger sense?
Arguably catalytic. Many late-entry actors succeed, but the New York scene of that period rewarded trust and speed. A recommendation from a working actor compresses the audition cycle. That compression matters for someone in his 40s building credits under the name Vincent Pastore. It enabled accumulation of roles across Goodfellas, Carlito's Way, and procedural television, which in turn made The Sopranos not a leap into the unknown, but a logical next step for a familiar face. Let's transition to another aspect. What if those friendships never formed? Counterfactuals are delicate but informative.
Right. What if he never met Matt and Kevin Dillon? Does Big Pussy look and feel different with a different actor? And do we still get the radio show, the source, the Shark Tale voice, the self-parody cameos?
The Sopranos would still have been great television, but the microtexture changes. Big Pussy's arc relies on a specific rapport with James Gandolfini's Tony Soprano. Pastore's combination of tenderness and menace under the wise guy shell gave that betrayal its ache. Another New York character actor might have delivered menace, but perhaps not the same wounded, almost familial softness. Downstream effects follow. Shark Tale's Luca is funny precisely because we recognize the wink. Animals explicitly loans him his own Sopranos identity. The Wise Guys show on Sirius, produced by Steven Van Zandt, capitalizes on that same recognition. Without the Sopranos scale, the radio platform might have been smaller. The 2019 sauce brand still conceivable, but the marketing halo thinner. Reality TV beats like the staged conflict and the cut to black on The Celebrity Apprentice depend on the audience's shared memory of Big Pussy. Absent that, the joke evaporates. Even the Shark Tank pivot from Broccoli Wad to Vinny's Wad only makes sense if his face and name carry a reliable comic charge.
And the public image. Without the Sopranos lift, would he have still been typecast? Or would he have been more anonymous within the same lane?
Likely the latter. He would still read as credible in mob-adjacent roles, but fame scales non-linearly. The Sopranos made him legible across media. Without it, we might remember him as that guy in Goodfellas and Carlito's Way. With it, we remember a name, a voice, a storyline, and a portfolio of self-aware cameos that invite the audience into the joke. On to our next point, the present-day uncertainty. In August 2026, he was found deceased at home on City Island. Reports at the time indicated the cause had not yet been confirmed. How does that lack of closure affect legacy?
It makes me wonder if the ambiguity nudges people to focus more on the work than on a narrative of decline. But it also creates space for speculation, which can be unhelpful.
Precisely. Ambiguity invites myth-making, and myth-making is not evidence. In this context, the responsible path is archival. We can document his late career energy, the Curse cameo in 2024, the Yellow Jackets voice role in 2025, the ongoing podcast that extended his radio sensibility, the Sauce venture. We can also document his philanthropic thread, for example, funds directed to pancreatic cancer research through game and reality shows, including the Celebrity Apprentice donation honoring Mitchell Burke. These are stable facts that resist the noise of speculation. The absence of a confirmed cause, at least in initial reports, should be acknowledged without inference. His legacy is the body of work and the community footprint, not the internet's appetite for closure.
Is there ongoing research we should watch? Like, what would be useful for scholars or fans who want to understand the whole arc?
Yes, several avenues. First, oral histories with collaborators from the New York 1990s production scene, including those who witnessed his shift from club life to set culture. Second, preservation of radio archives from Sirius and WVOX, as they capture the unscripted voice that the screen rolls only imply. Third, production documents and interviews around The Sopranos to understand how casting choices shaped story architecture. His arc is a case study in ensemble chemistry. Fourth, a cultural economy analysis of celebrity branding, from Shark Tank's Vinny's Wad pivot to the Sauce line, as an example of persona monetization. Finally, careful tracking of final projects and any public record updates concerning August 2026 to replace uncertainty with citation when authorities release them. To summarize, typecasting is not merely a constraint, it can be a platform. Vincent Pastore's wise guy persona, born of biography, training, and shrewd timing, traveled from Goodfellas to The Sopranos, to Shark Tale, and onward into radio, reality TV, entrepreneurship, and podcasting. Our three big questions trace the inputs that set his trajectory: the counterfactual, where a door never opened, and the present ambiguity surrounding his death that calls for restraint and documentation rather than conjecture.
For further study, maybe compare his path to other character actors who leaned into a single archetype. It could show when typecasting freezes options and when it becomes leverage. So, I guess that kind of sums it up.
Thank you for listening. This then completes our present analysis.